Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kara's Cure Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. I'm Kara Sundlin. Are you feeling a little drained as we approach the weekend of Christmas and Christmas Eve? Does the schedule feel too full and you're thinking, I just can't do another holiday party? Today, we're talking about why just saying no is good for your mental health. Dr. Laura Saunders is a psychologist from the Institute of Living, and she's talking about how when we do this, when we say no, it actually is something that is saying yes to our mental health sometimes. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Kara. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us this. Why is declining too many invitations, or why is declining invitations to holiday parties perhaps good for you?
So, interesting little research article was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and what it looked at was the effects of declining invitations, and they, came up with a scenario, and what they found essentially, and this is obviously a very shortened version, but what they found is that that we consistently overestimate how upset someone else will be if we decline their invitation.
Yeah, so we're worried about disappointing someone, and that's often why we say yes. So why would it be beneficial for us to just say no?
Often, when you have an individual has a lot going on in their life, this is a very busy holiday season, and I'd like to emphasize that it's a good busy, right? But it's still a stressor. It's just like planning a wedding. It's exciting that someone's getting married, but the infinitesimal steps to plan a wedding can be very, very stressful. It's similar around the holiday time. There's gatherings, there's parties, there's family events, there's all sorts of things happening. And sometimes we feel like we should accept every invitation. And that can just be overwhelming. It can be too much. So I think what this little research article was trying to show is that doing things to set boundaries and take care of yourself, i.e. declining some invitations, or if you have too much going on in a weekend, to not do back-to-back things, but having some sense of empowerment that you can decline invitations. What this research showed is that the other people are not going to be so devastated as you think, and it's going to be good for your own well-being and mental health.
Yeah, because holiday burnout is a real thing, right?
It's absolutely a real thing. I mean, burnout can happen at different points of the year, but holiday burnout is a definite real thing. And so the more we can do things to set boundaries, empower ourselves, create some emotional space for ourselves just to be or not to do something. And sometimes that's being on your own. Sometimes it's just being at home with your spouse or your partner, or just being at home with your kids. Whatever you need to do to take care of yourself in some of these situations, because parties and events, they take preparation. You might have to bring some food. You might have to bring a gift, right? It's not usually just like showing up and presenting yourself. It usually requires a lot of extra work.
Yeah, and I think we underestimate that. Like, you look at your calendar, I can do it, I could make it there, I have enough time to drive from point A to point B. How should we instead be looking at our obligations or invitations with mental health in mind?
So if we're going to look at some ways to kind of avoid holiday burnout, then let's sort of, quantify this a little bit. There's things, besides just saying no sometimes, which can be very mentally healthy. It also is, delegating, not feeling like you have to do everything on your own. So if you are deciding to go to an event, ask your, spouse, your partner, your husband, your wife to pick up something at the store so that you don't feel like you have to make something. People cannot read your mind. So if you're hosting a holiday event, ask, and generally, it's in my experience, people say, what can I bring or what can I do? Allow people to bring something or do something. So don't do it alone. Ask for help, and don't be afraid to delegate.
So important. And I think, I like to say that we have to be the CEO of our own life, because sometimes we feel guilty. Oh, I should do that. And what you're saying is just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it all. And this falls a lot on moms. It really does. I mean, I don't know if we bring it on ourselves. We don't think anyone else is capable, or we just do it.
Right.
But moms are famous for this, right? We just overdo everything, gifts, parties, and then you show up at the holiday, you're exhausted.
Yes. And right. I think sometimes I use sports metaphors, right? I think the mom, the often, not always, but often in a very gendered way, moms see themselves as the coach, right? The spouse or partner might just be the assistant coach, and they need delegation and they need jobs. And you can spread some jobs to the kids as well. But yes, the task of organizing and planning and managing really often, not always, but often falls on the mom. So that's a lot of work, besides maybe working or going to school or whatever other jobs and responsibilities that you have. I think the other thing to look out for to avoid holiday burnout is sort of how we phrase things, what words we use. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, there are people out there who feel kind of lonely and disconnected, who would long for invitations, right? So for us to say, oh, I just have so many invitations, or I hate being invited to so many events, or, it's really, it's really so hard to go to parties, right? I mean, you're really setting yourself up for a lot of kind of negativity. That's very different than, I'm fortunate to have friends and family that invite me. Doesn't mean you have to go to everything, but I'm fortunate to have friends and family invite me. Or let me just focus on what I can get done in the next hour, and then I'll make decisions about the following hour. So trying to frame things in your life in a more open and positive way, as opposed to always looking at the negative.
Yeah, so language really matters. And so, right, we talk about that with gratitude. Instead of saying I have to, maybe could you frame it to I get to? I remind myself of that when I'm going to work and it's busy and it's crazy. I'm like, wait, I get to interview Dr. Laura Saunders and share amazing tips about mental health to thousands of people. Like, I should probably say I get to, not that I have to.
Right. Right. And because that's how you frame it for yourself. Because when you frame everything in such a kind of like negative, pejorative, constrained way, that's actually how you're going to look at your day, right? We call it cognitive restructuring. How you frame your cognitions, how you frame the thoughts in your mind really has an impact on how you feel about them.
So I want to go back to saying no and how this could be good for your mental health. And there was someone in the newsroom who watches all your segments and said, I got to see this one because I just committed to go to a wedding in Miami and I don't want to go. But I felt so bad saying no. I feel like I need to go, and I'm buying plane tickets. I'm like, well, that's a big yes, to fly and all. But they're like, I don't know how to say no. And this is a big problem for a lot of folks, that they'd almost rather exhaust themselves than say no. So how do we say no in a way that we can feel empowered about it and not guilty?
So there's two parts to that when you bring up that example. That's a really good example, right? There's two parts to it. There's those of us who are, for to use a turn of phrase, like a people pleaser, right? And it's like, I'm invited to an event, I have to go to an event. And it's a beautiful thing to be invited to someone's wedding, that they want to share their special day with you, or to be invited to someone's holiday gathering. It's not like they're inviting hundreds of people. You were one of the people invited. So there's those of us who are kind of people pleasers. We want to please the people around us. The second part to that is the need or to over-explain ourselves. So often we feel that we have to explain or over-explain. I can't go to that wedding in Miami because I have something going on the weekend before and the next weekend after, and they go on and on and on. And they might not even be saying it to the other person. They start with over-explaining to themselves. And what we find in most situations is all you need to do is set the limit and step back from it. I'm sorry I can't attend your blessed event, or I'm sorry I can't attend your wedding, or I apologize for not being able to make it to your holiday gathering, or thank you for the invitation to your event. I have a conflicting event. Right. You don't have to say, I've had the conflicting event for 2 months and it was given to me by my cousin who I haven't seen in this year at all. Right. You don't need to over explain. So cut back on the over explaining. You can give a piece of information. I have a conflicting event, or I'm not available at that time, or it doesn't fit into my schedule based on several other conflicts. You can give a basic piece of information, but you don't need to over explain yourself. And that's often coming from a place of overly wanting to please people around you.
So sometimes saying no is good for our mental health because we just need some downtime. So you could say, thank you so much for inviting me, but I have a conflict. That conflict might be laying alone and watching a show, or taking a bath, or some sort of self-care.
Yeah, right. And that is like putting yourself on the schedule. That self-care is really, really important. We cannot do it all. Right?
Yes.
I have a little thing on my desk that says you can do anything, but not everything.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, these are the things I remind myself, right? There isn't anything that I can do. I know in my heart and in my mind that I can do anything, but I cannot do everything, because the reality is I won't do everything well. And in that process, I won't be taking care of myself. So I could attend all events, but that won't be taking care of myself. So finding a way to fit in some self-care, and if self-care is laying home in your pajamas with a blanket and, you know, eating some popcorn and watching some movies, or just taking a day to get some of your own things done, or just taking some time to kind of focus on something that your kids need because you've been doing so many things outside the house, whatever that self-care means to you, I'd like it to be a little bit of like truly self-care, but it's doing those things that feel important to you, that set a boundary around your own well-being.
Yes, and I think some of us, the older I've gotten, the more I've accepted that I might need a little more alone time than my husband or than other people. You know, when I think you judge yourself, like, why can't I go all day and all night? And some people, we have to kind of know, self-care would mean knowing how much emotional space we need and actually putting that on the schedule.
Knowing yourself is I think a lifelong maturing process, right? How I behaved and acted in my 20s and 30s is different than how I need to sort of conduct myself or behave or schedule myself now. My needs are different now than they were 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so the more we can know ourselves, truly understand and identify what we need, the better those needs can be met. If we have no idea that we need downtime, then we're just going to overschedule ourselves and then be mentally and physically exhausted. And when you're mentally and physically exhausted, you are far more likely to pick up viruses, to feel emotionally unwell. So you really kind of run yourself ragged physically and emotionally if you don't know yourself well enough to know what you need in a given situation.
And as moms, we tend to yell at our kids or yell at our spouses, or, we'll keep going thinking you can do it, and then all of a sudden you snap. And that's sort of a symptom that we are overstimulated. We've taken on too much, right?
Yeah, it's just too much in those situations. And what I'd love for us to do is not get to that breaking point, right? Now, it doesn't mean sometimes we don't creep up to the line of the breaking point, but to not get to that breaking point, to pull ourselves back, to start really being mindful of what you need in a given situation. What do I need in this situation? Do I need to connect with people? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to, do even something alternative, right? What do I need in this situation? What's going to be the best decision for me and for my family sometimes too? Because sometimes overscheduling ourselves means you're dragging your kids all over the place, and they need the downtime also.
Yeah, and we've done episodes on that too sometimes. I mean, there's temptation to really overschedule the kids because it seems like everybody else is doing so many things. So this is something that we're seeing online. We're seeing, I mean, self-care has become almost trendy, but this isn't a trendy topic. I mean, this really is rooted in clinical psychology, right? So we all need self-care. What is it from your perspective of really keeping mental health on the radar?
So it's a trendy topic because we've started talking about it a lot more. And, you know, I've said this before. So I think one of the few good things that COVID did is that it made people aware that there is no physical health without your emotional well-being. And so because of COVID, we really have talked much more openly about emotional well-being and mental health and the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. You know, in COVID, you know, early on, it was like, you know, the introverts were thrilled because they didn't have to go out, they didn't have to see people. The extroverts were stressed. What am I going to do? I'm going to be stuck home alone all the time, right? But that's an introspective process. The more we can have some level of introspection, knowing yourself, identifying what you need, understanding what works well for you and what doesn't work well for you. By doing that, you also become a role model for your children, because you're saying, you know, I had an event on Friday and I already have something on Sunday I can't get out of. Let's just spend the day today, Saturday, you know, having some downtime. I might need to do a little food shopping or do a few other things, but for the most part, we're not going to schedule ourselves. That's knowing what you need and then saying it out loud, right? So, because now you're modeling for your children why you're doing what you're doing, and stepping into that self-care.
Yeah, and it can be very different. You brought up introverts and extroverts, and I shared this with you before, but for our listeners, it may be surprising for people to know that I am an introvert. And it was surprising to me when a therapist told me that. And I said, I'm not an introvert. Don't you know what I do for a living? I get on, I talk on TV, I do all this stuff. They're like, yeah, that has nothing to do with it. It's not about being shy. It's about, do you gain or lose energy from others? And that was my first time even learning that, I remember. And so when we need to recharge more, you might be not shy and extrovert in some situations, but you may still be an introvert.
Right. You might need that downtime to restore your emotional energy to then be able to go out into the world and manage, you know, whatever expectations you have. Right. So that is kind of the core definition, right? The introvert is the individual who uses downtime or alone time to store up their emotional energy to manage their social expectations. Extroverts are those individuals who get fueled and energized by social invitations and social expectations and social connections in order to manage their downtime or alone time. Now, and there is those individuals who are like ambiverts who need that socialization and social connection, but also need sometimes equal amounts of downtime or alone time. So it is about knowing yourself. It is about really kind of being mindful of what emotional state you're in, because there's also, you know, different things for seasons, right? This is a very busy season, so there's a lot of demands and expectations. So you might have lots of different events. Come the middle of January, people might say, I haven't gone out in 3 weeks. I probably need to schedule something for myself. So knowing kind of what you need in a given situation, looking at either the seasons or time of year, and kind of what's going on for you emotionally. You know, we didn't even get into, you know, that the holiday time is often a time where losses or changes really become very kind of like emotional weight for individuals. It doesn't even have to be that the loss happened in, you know, in November and December. The loss could have happened at another time of year, but this is such a time for reflection, that, you know, losses or changes in custody, divorces, estrangement, these kinds of things really have an impact on individuals. So the more you can recognize like why you're so low energy, why it's been hard to get out of bed, why you don't feel like showering, why you're not enjoying things that you typically would enjoy, it's saying to yourself, okay, yeah, I'm really feeling the loss of this person, or yes, you know, the custody changes after my divorce are really having an impact on me. It's identifying that, because I think once you identify it, then you can take steps to do something to help yourself feel better.
Right. And that's your point of being mindful of our emotions. I mean, sometimes we just need to pause and be like, what am I feeling right now? Or what do I need right now?
Right. This is a season of intense highs. Like, that was such a fun time. Oh, that was so great. And intense lows, right? This is the time of year I lost my mother, and this is a very sad time for me. Sometimes even hearkening back to childhood memories and remembering really good times, and things are so different now, right? So it can be a time of highs and lows. So it's knowing what some of your triggers are, identifying those things. It's certainly okay to acknowledge it. I'm not saying we have to wipe away sadness and grief, but we have to acknowledge it and step into it. And acknowledging that means sometimes speaking it out loud, or saying to yourself, gosh, this time, this is always a tough time of year for me, because I sometimes feel sad about how different my life is, or my kids are kind of grown and flown. So it really is that introspection that's important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And taking that mind. I mean, I know that grief, I can think of some folks that are close to us. Our viewers know Denise DeCenzo passed in early December, so I always think of her family, which is like family to us. And it can be a really tough time to, that people don't want to celebrate holidays. They don't want to. There's a lot of shoulding going on. I should do this. I should do that. What do you say when you're feeling, I should go to a party, or I should be putting up a tree, or I should? The minute we're saying should, does that mean we're probably just not meeting our own expectations?
Yeah, I think it's certainly it's an opportunity to step back. Like, I should do this. Okay, well, why should you? How will that help you? How will that make you feel better? How will that make you feel more connected to yourself? How will that make you feel more connected to family or friends? Right. So take a moment, kind of think a little bit about what the meaning is behind something, as opposed to just doing things in a rote way and not really giving it any time to, like, what's the impact on me? Because so many of us do things for other people. And, sometimes it's about reflecting on, this is important for me, or I really need to step back, acknowledge why this is hard for me, and then maybe do it differently.
And that's part of it, is sometimes the traditions get us stressed out around this time, because you're like, well, I should do the 7 fishes because my Italian grandmother did that. And you're thinking, I don't even know where to get 7 fishes, or nobody even likes all the 7 fishes. And it costs so much money to buy 7 fishes. I mean, but we're like, I have to have the 7 fishes on the table. We get into those shoulds and have tos around the holidays. And as a psychologist, can you give us permission that it's just okay to do it differently, even though we might have always done it a different way?
So here's the general guideline. The higher your expectations, the more work it takes to meet those expectations and maintain them. So sometimes it's about lowering your expectations. I'm not saying have no expectations, right? But lowering your expectations, having limited or minimal expectations, putting forth the effort to then meet those expectations. And then anything above that is gravy, as they say, right? It's bonus. Wow. Yes, I grew up, if you grew up with the traditions of the 7 fishes, I think it's for Christmas Eve, right?
Right.
I grew up with that tradition, but the way my grandmother did it, she had help from all my aunts and uncles, and it was I don't really have that kind of help. Okay, then let's have a different kind of experience. But maybe at that experience, talk about the memory, share the memory, recreate some of those experiences. And then, so you don't have to sort of put it aside, but you want to manage expectations in a way that creates more emotional success.
Yeah, and just even asking like that, like, what do I really want, or what do I really need, or how do I want to do this, or why do I do this way? Putting yourself on the list. This is the time of year where we talk about lists, naughty, nice, Christmas gifts, who's on the list. What you're asking us to do is just put yourself on that list. That extra minute of filtering could be really life-changing for our emotional well-being.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love it if you not just put yourself, delegated and kind of scheduled time for yourself, but if you went for a walk, or meditated for a few minutes, or I don't care if you just watch a show that you've been wanting to watch and taking some time for yourself, right? It's actually doing things. It's the act of doing something, carving out time, creating emotional space for yourself, because that's often when the introspection comes in, right? I'm a big person. I love to do walks and morning walks because it's really too dark in the afternoons to do anything later. But that's a great time for introspection. So taking that time for yourself, deep breathing, having oxygen course through your system, it allows your brain to think, it allows your body to move. And, even it doesn't have to be an hour-long walk. Sometimes it can just be a 5 or 10 minute walk. It's getting outside in the fresh air, a little bit of vitamin D sunshine, but it's the act of putting yourself first.
All of these small things can really add up. I mean, maybe you don't have access to a therapist, maybe you don't have time in your schedule, maybe you don't have all this, you have all these grand intentions, but just even those 5 minutes, those little times, those little mindfulness snacks, I guess, throughout the day really add up.
Yeah, I love that. So, right, a mindfulness snack, right? It's taking a little time in the morning. It's writing in your gratitude journal in the afternoon. It's during the workday, going out and just going for a short walk. It's doing little things to shore up your emotional well-being can really add up at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we have our final 2 minutes together. Some of us, I think, again, I'll go back to moms, but, there's so many expectations of wanting to make it perfect and wanting to this. And there's a lot we've talked about in other episodes, and I see some influencers talking about it's okay to just have an okay Christmas. Like, start there. Like, we could just enjoy. I posted the other day that slowing down is a power move. And some people might go, oh, this is the busiest time of the year, the most wonderful time of the year. But it doesn't have to be. Like, we could just have an okay time. We could make more time to kind of do nothing.
Right. So, yes, it's okay. It doesn't need to be great. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be the best ever. It can just be okay. That's a real standard also, because that is a sign that you're kind of lowered your expectations. And I think, what I'd love in these situations is sometimes when things don't quite go the way that you had hoped for, that you can bring humor in, right? It might not be that you can't laugh in the moment, like if the Christmas tree falls over and, a couple of your favorite ornaments got broken, you might not laugh in the moment. But to take time to reflect later, like, boy, that was a really ridiculous experience, wasn't it? Right. So the more we can find ways to sort of flip the script, that's a cognitive script right there. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened. It wasn't a great thing, but oh my goodness, can you believe, I tied the tree up again and I still can't do it good enough to keep it standing. Whatever, right. That you sort of take on meaning and try to look at things a little differently. Find a little humor.
Absolutely. Humor is for sure healing. Dr. Laura Saunders, we appreciate your wisdom as always. I hope everyone out there can be a little empowered and know that no is saying yes to yourselves. So for more information on the cutting edge of wellness, you can follow me at Kara Sundlin on Facebook, Instagram, and join the Kara's Cures Facebook group. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.